battle, no fire compares to that slow, invisible death. You can almost feel the tension tighten in the air, a shared breath held too long. A curious detail from an old sea chronicle tells of sailors who learned to listen for the song of the ice. It was said that if you heard a high whistling tone in the night, the ice was moving toward you. The sound meant danger, but also a kind of eerie beauty. Men described it as the sea singing in its sleep. You listen now, and for a moment you think you hear it too, a faint melodic hum beneath the wind. The pirates continue their work. One climbs into the rigging, swinging a small axe. Another drags a barrel across the deck to block a leak. Their faces are red with cold, eyes watering. No one speaks. The sound of wood cracking and tools striking fills the air. It feels like a ritual, harsh but necessary. Your breath fogs as you exhale. The frost forms on your lashes, turning the world into a blur of light and shadow. You wipe it away and catch sight of the helmsman, his hands clenched on the wheel. His gloves are stiff, his knuckles white. Every movement is careful. Even the smallest mistake could send the ship into an ice floe. The lanterns burn low, their light dimmed by frost on the glass. The deck glitters faintly, a frozen mosaic of salt and snow. You hear someone whisper a prayer, though you cannot make out the words. It sounds old, maybe older than the ship itself. Records from a 15th century Danish voyage describe how crews used oil-soaked rags to keep the ropes flexible during freezes. Pirates might have copied the trick, rubbing the lines with grease stolen from whalers or merchants. It must have smelled terrible, but it kept the ship alive. Even now, one man kneels near the bow, rubbing a thick black paste into the ropes. His hands shake, but he keeps working. The sky darkens quickly, the clouds sinking low until they touch the horizon. Snow begins to fall again, heavier this time. Thick flakes swirling in the wind. The world fades into white. The sea and sky merge, leaving no sense of direction. The pirates stop for a moment, staring out into the blankness. You can feel their unease. Out here, the line between water and air disappears. One man laughs softly to himself, maybe to break the tension. "The sea's gone blind," he says. No one answers. The silence that follows feels heavier than the cold. You stand still, letting the flakes settle on your shoulders. The cold presses close, but the air is strangely peaceful. You can almost believe the world has stopped moving. The sound of the waves is gone, replaced by the faint crackle of ice forming on the hull. The pirates retreat below deck one by one, leaving you alone with the whispering snow. For a moment, you feel as they must have felt, small, fragile, and completely at the mercy of the frozen world. The ship is alive beneath you, groaning softly, pushing forward through a sea that has turned to glass. Somewhere ahead, the horizon waits, hidden under layers of mist and ice. And you understand why sailors feared the northern routes more than any cannon. By the next night, the ship has grown eerily quiet. The wind has softened, but the cold feels sharper than ever, cutting straight through fabric and bone. The sea is calm, too calm. The waves small and slow, as though the ocean itself has frozen mid-breath. You walk carefully along the deck, hearing nothing but the creak of timbers underfoot and the faint rattle of a loose chain. Below deck, the stillness feels heavier. The lanterns burn low, their flames thin and trembling. The air carries a sour tang that turns your stomach. It is the smell of sickness mixed with damp wood and salt. A man coughs in the shadows, the sound thick and wet. Another groans softly, rolling in his hammock. The rest try to sleep through it, though their eyes remain half open, dull and weary. Old maritime journals describe how illness was the true predator of the sea. Cold weather made it worse. Frostbite, scurvy, and fever stalked the lower decks as ruthlessly as any enemy ship. Once infection began, it spread fast through the cramped quarters. A single cough could travel faster than a cannonball. You kneel beside one of the sick men. His lips are cracked, his skin pale beneath a layer of sweat. He stares at the ceiling and mumbles a prayer you cannot quite catch. His fingers twitch as though grasping a rope that is no longer there. The air around him feels warmer than the rest of the room, heavy with fever. A curious practice mentioned in one physician's record tells of sailors rubbing vinegar on their hands and faces to ward off disease. They believed the sourness killed the invisible mists that carried illness. The pirates here may have tried the same, though the smell of decay in the air suggests it did little good. The vinegar burned, but it offered the illusion of control, and illusions were sometimes all they had. You move deeper into the shadows. A bucket sits near the bulkhead, half full of murky water. Someone has vomited into it recently. A rat darts across the floor, its fur sleek, its eyes bright. The pirates ignore it. Rats are companions here, both pests and protectors. They warn of rot, and they eat what men cannot bear to touch. From a modern perspective, historians note that pirates often suffered the same plagues as the naval fleets they hunted. Lack of fresh food led to scurvy, damp clothes invited frostbite. Infection turned minor wounds into death sentences. Yet despite the misery, crews rarely complained openly. To show weakness at sea was to invite mutiny or abandonment. The sick were cared for only as long as they were useful. You glance toward the corner where one man sits awake, sharpening a knife in slow, deliberate strokes. His eyes are distant, focused on nothing. Perhaps he sharpens it for comfort, perhaps for fear. The sound of metal scraping against stone fills the silence like a heartbeat. He pauses only to take a drink from a flask, then continues. The sick man beside him stares at the motion as if hypnotized. A whisper spreads among the crew that the fever has taken 3 men already. One was thrown overboard without ceremony, wrapped in a canvas shroud. They say his body froze before it sank. The others lie below, too weak to move. The living step carefully between them, pretending not to notice. In this kind of cold, grief has no energy to burn. Researchers still discuss whether pirates practiced any form of quarantine. Some argue that they pushed the ill aside, keeping them near the hold. Others suggest a rough compassion, with men sharing their rum or covering a comrade with an extra blanket. The truth likely depended on the crew and on how close death already stood. You feel a shiver run through the floor as a wave bumps the hull. The lanterns sway, casting brief shadows across the sleeping men. Their faces flicker between peace and pain. One mutters for water, another calls for a mother long dead. You realize that this darkness holds more than just night. It holds every fear that thrives when warmth runs out. There's an entry in a 15th century sailor's journal that describes this same hush, calling it the silence before the sea takes her due. The writer said the crew stopped singing, stopped arguing, even stopped laughing. The only sound was breathing, slow and careful, as if noise itself could invite disaster. That silence is here now, pressing on your ears until it feels almost physical. The ship rolls again, and somewhere above a gull cries a lonely, distant sound. It fades quickly, leaving only the creak of the hull. You think about how fragile this floating world really is. A few inches of wood separate life from the freezing water. The men below cling to that wood, as if their faith alone keeps it from splintering. You take a deep breath, but the air tastes stale.
The cold finds its way into your lungs, sharp and clean, as if to remind you how thin the line between breathing and choking can be. You look once more at the sick men, their faces slick with fever. One has fallen silent completely. A companion checks him with 2 fingers against his neck, then covers his face with a rag. No one speaks. The work of living continues. Above, the ship rolls onward, indifferent to the loss. The cold does not pity, and the sea does not pause. Yet somehow, in the dim light and stifling air, you feel the heartbeat of humanity still pulsing. Each cough, each breath, each small act of care keeps the dark from swallowing everything. Morning returns with a pale sky and a silence that feels uneasy. The ship drifts through the gray water, slow and heavy. You step carefully along the deck, where a thin crust of
superstitions settling deep in the men's bones, half belief, half insurance against fear. The cat leaps down and prowls toward a coil of rope, sniffing at it before curling up in a small, perfect circle. Its quiet purr fills the stillness. You realize that even a sound so small can make the ship feel less empty. But cats were not the only comforts on board. Between the coils of rope and barrels of salted food, you find small signs of humanity tucked away. A piece of cloth with stitching shaped like a flower, a crude wooden carving of a woman's face, a seashell tied to a nail. These little things mean more than gold. Here, each one is a reminder of land, of warmth, of something worth returning to. One pirate sits near the mast, sharpening a knife with slow, careful motions. Around his neck hangs a charm made from a piece of colored glass. It catches the faint sunlight and scatters it across his hands. He notices you looking and shrugs. "Keeps the cold away," he says with a half-smile. "The charm might not hold heat, but it holds faith, and that is enough." The wind shifts slightly, carrying the smell of salt and tar. The men move about their work with quiet precision. Some patch sails, others scrape frost from the planks. The cat follows them from task to task, as if overseeing the crew. Occasionally, one of them pauses to scratch its back, earning a grateful purr. The sound feels almost like laughter in a place where laughter has grown scarce. A note from an old chronicler describes how sailors believed animals sensed danger before humans did. Cats, dogs, even birds were watched closely for signs of trouble. When a cat flattened its ears or hissed at nothing, the crew took it as a warning. Looking at this small creature now, you can understand why. It moves with purpose, its eyes bright, as though reading messages in the wind no man can hear. One of the younger pirates kneels beside the cat, whispering something. You cannot hear the words, but his tone is gentle. He scratches behind its ears, then slips it a small piece of dried meat from his pocket. For a moment, he smiles like a boy, his shoulders relaxing. The cold, the sickness, the endless gray sea, all of it fades in that small exchange. Even modern historians admit that companionship played a crucial role in surviving long voyages. Without warmth or comfort, men lost their minds as easily as their fingers to frostbite. Shared jokes, small rituals, and animals like this cat became anchors for sanity. They reminded the crew that life was still worth protecting, even in misery. You look around and notice other traces of care. Someone has mended a torn blanket with surprising precision, using thread dyed red. Another has carved initials into the mast, perhaps his own or someone he left behind. These fragments of gentleness feel fragile, but they are stubborn too. They refuse to vanish no matter how fierce the sea becomes. The cat stretches and yawns, then climbs up to a beam where it can watch the men below. Its tail sways lazily as it settles in a patch of weak sunlight.
The pirates glance up at it from time to time, as if its calm is contagious. Even the sick below deck might sleep easier, knowing it is still there, alive and watching. You take one last look at the small animal before turning toward the horizon. The wind has shifted again, colder now, carrying a thin mist across the deck. The cat lifts its head briefly, then curls back into sleep, unbothered. There is something reassuring in that. If a creature so small can find peace here, perhaps the men can too, if only for a little while. The sky brightens slightly, the color of pale silver. The ship continues forward, steady despite the ice and wind. Below deck, the coughing fades for now. Above, the cat dreams in the sunlight, and the pirates work quietly, bound together by exhaustion, superstition, and the faint, stubborn warmth of their small comforts. You push open the door to the captain's quarters, half expecting warmth and grandeur. But what greets you is another pocket of cold air, tinged with the smell of damp wood and lamp oil. The cabin is small, more a narrow box than a room, with a single lantern hanging from a beam that groans each time the ship moves. The light spills over a desk cluttered with maps, scraps of parchment, and a cracked compass. The captain sits hunched over the desk, his coat heavy, his shoulders curved like a man who carries more than the weight of frost. His hands, rough and scarred, rest beside an open book. You cannot see what he writes, but you hear the soft scratch of a quill on paper, steady and deliberate. The sound is almost comforting. Captains in the age of sail often had the illusion of privilege, but in truth, their cabins offered little more than privacy. Historical logs from 15th century voyages described rooms like this, cramped, drafty, and filled with the groan of timbers. The captain slept alone, yes, but he was never free from the sea's reach. The cold slid in through every crack, and the noise never stopped. You take a step closer. The light catches his face. He looks older than he likely is, eyes sunk deep beneath dark circles. A faint line of frost glitters in his beard where his breath has frozen. He glances up, nods once, then returns to his writing. The expression is not unkind, just tired, bone-tired, in the way only those who have led men through storms can understand. On the table beside him sits a half-empty bottle and a single pewter cup. The smell of rum hangs faintly in the air. Next to it lies a pistol, polished but worn, and a folded handkerchief embroidered with initials now faded, almost invisible. You sense that the handkerchief belonged to someone else, someone left behind. A curious entry in a captured pirate's journal described how captains often wrote at night to calm their thoughts. Some kept ledgers of loot and supplies. Others recorded dreams, regrets, or prayers. Even a few wrote letters they would never send. It was their only way to speak honestly when surrounded by men who worshipped bravado. You look at the bed against the wall. It is little more than a wooden frame with a mattress stuffed with straw. The blanket is thick but worn, patched with mismatched fabric. A lantern hangs nearby, its glow too weak to warm the air. The pillow looks damp from condensation. So much for luxury. The captain sleeps no better than his crew. He sighs quietly, setting the quill aside. His hands tremble slightly as he flexes his fingers, stiff from cold. Then, as if remembering something, he opens a small box beside the desk. Inside are coins, bits of metal, and a single locket. He opens it briefly, revealing the miniature painting of a woman's face, her expression serene. He looks at it for a long moment before closing the lid. There is a detail in one sailor's testimony about how captains hide tokens like that, not for sentiment alone, but for sanity. Leadership at sea was isolation in its purest form. Every decision could mean life or death, and mistakes left marks that never healed. The locket, the drink, the diary, all small defenses against guilt. The ship shifts, groaning as the hull scrapes ice. The lantern swings, sending light across the walls. You notice carvings edged into the wood, marks of storm survived, perhaps, were ports visited. One shape stands out, a rough cross cut deep into the grain. It looks newer than the rest. Maybe a memorial, maybe a plea. The captain glances at it, then looks away quickly. A gust of wind rattles the small window. He stands, adjusts his coat, and looks outside. His reflection in the glass looks like a ghost trapped behind the frost. The sea is dark, and flakes of snow cling to the edges of the window pane. He breathes out, fogging the glass, then wipes it with his sleeve. The motion is automatic, almost tender. Modern historians still wonder how captains balanced authority with humanity on such ships. Some believe they ruled with cruelty to keep order, while others argue that compassion was the only way to survive in such close quarters. The truth likely shifted from man to man, storm to storm. This captain seems quiet, steady, but the silence around him carries its own kind of weight. He moves toward the bed and sits, rubbing his temples. His pistol remains within reach, gleaming faintly in the light. You sense that he sleeps lightly, if at all. Perhaps every creak of the ship wakes him. Perhaps he dreams of mutiny, or the faces of those who never return from raids. In one of the old chronicles, a captured sailor wrote that a captain's sleep is a coin flipped by the sea. If the night is calm, he might rest. If not, he lies awake, listening to the water whisper.
Something unspoken. Down here, sleep no longer comes easily. The cold has crept into their tempers. The men lie in their hammocks, faces half hidden in the dim light. A few whisper to each other, voices sharp and hurried. Others stare upward at the beams, eyes wide open. The ship groans softly, a sound that might be mistaken for breathing. Somewhere a bottle rolls and clinks. Someone curses under their breath. From countless old ship logs, we know that tension thrived on long voyages. Hunger, frost, exhaustion, and fear built slowly until they burst. Pirates were no exception. They lacked the discipline of navies, but they understood anger all too well. When warmth and food ran thin, words became weapons. You move closer to one cluster of hammocks where 3 men are speaking in low tones. Their voices are thick with drink and resentment. "He keeps the best rations for himself," one says. "The captain eats soft bread while we chew salt." Another mutters something about the sick being thrown overboard too soon. Their words coil through the air like smoke, quiet but poisonous. A small detail found in an intercepted pirate letter mentions that captains often slept with weapons close at hand, not because of battles at sea, but because of mutiny in the dark. Men driven by cold and hunger could forget loyalty in a heartbeat. You look at these faces and wonder which ones are still loyal and which ones are already plotting. A sudden thud echoes from the far corner as a man drops from his hammock. He sways slightly before standing. His eyes glint in the half-light. "Keep your mouth shut," he growls. No one answers. The tension thickens. You feel it settle on your skin like frost. Modern scholars who study maritime life still argue about what truly fueled mutinies. Some say greed for loot. Others insist it was despair. But here, in the biting cold of endless nights, despair feels like the more dangerous enemy. Greed needs planning. Misery needs only silence. The standing pirate finally moves away, his footsteps heavy on the boards. The others watch him leave, saying nothing. Then one whispers, "He'll snap soon." They share a short laugh, the kind that carries no humor. You realize they all fear each other now. Sleep has turned from refuge to risk. The lantern flickers, making shadows lurch across the walls. The ship sways gently, but the mood inside stays sharp and brittle. Even the cat,
curled in a corner, keeps its eyes open. Its ears twitch with every sound. The men try to settle again, pulling blankets tighter, turning their backs to one another. A curious fact from a 15th century trial record describes a mutiny that began over a blanket. One man took another's during a freezing night. By morning, blood stained the deck. The court called it madness born of cold. Reading that, you understand how easily these nights could end the same way. You glance at one pirate near the door. He holds a knife, not drawn, but ready. His hand rests lightly on the hilt, even as his eyes close around him. Others shift uneasily, pretending not to notice. Trust has frozen, like the sea outside. The smell of sweat and smoke thickens the air. Someone mutters a prayer in a foreign tongue. Another spits into the corner. The quiet hum of the ship feels too loud now, every creak an accusation. You realize how fragile this peace really is. There is an account written by a monk who sailed with privateers that claims the sea is the greatest judge, for she listens before she punishes. He wrote that after surviving a night when his crewmates turned on one another midwinter, the survivors swore they heard laughter in the waves afterward. Whether true or not, the story clings to the air now, like salt mist. You take a slow breath. The lantern sputters. Somewhere above, the wind rises again, rattling the rigging. The sound breaks the tension slightly, drawing every eye upward. The cold is returning, seeping back through the wood. Perhaps that is enough to remind them that the real enemy is outside for now. A voice from the corner speaks suddenly, calm but firm. Sleep while you can. Morning will judge what we say tonight. The others fall silent. No one argues. The ship creaks once more, a sound like an old sigh. Gradually the whispers fade. One by one, the men drift toward uneasy rest. The knife stays close, the mistrust closer. Above them the sea groans, moving under a sky too heavy for stars. You watch the shadows breathe in and out, knowing that peace here lasts only as long as the cold allows it. The next morning arrives with a dim bluish light that seems to seep through every crack in the ship. The frost still clings to the ropes, glittering faintly in the dawn, but the air feels oddly still. You step onto the deck, your breath clouding in front of you. The sea is quiet again, a pale mirror stretching to the horizon. The pirates move like ghosts, silent and slow, their faces drawn tight with fatigue. The cold has settled deep into their bones now, but they have learned to fight it in their own strange ways. You notice how they move in pairs or small groups, working close together, sharing what little warmth they can. A man tightens the rigging, while another stands shoulder to shoulder with him, their movements synchronized. No one speaks, yet there is a rhythm in their silence, a small defiance against the cold. Records from a northern trade ship of the 14th century mention that sailors often slept in clusters during the coldest nights, pressing close under shared blankets. It was not sentiment, but survival. The human body produces more heat than any lantern or brazier. The pirates on this ship have discovered the same truth. You watch as two men lean against the mast, wrapped together in a single tattered cloak. Their eyes are closed, breathing slow and steady, their bodies swaying with the ship's movement. Another small group sits on the deck, passing a flask back and forth, their shoulders touching. The cold is still there, sharp and merciless, but they have learned how to soften it with closeness. A curious entry in a 15th century sailor's diary described a practice called back-sleeping. Two men would lie facing opposite directions, backs pressed together, sharing heat through the night. It was considered practical, not intimate. Yet, in these conditions, every small gesture carried meaning. You can almost see it now, rough faces, tired eyes, silent gratitude in the shared warmth. The ship rolls slightly, and one of the men laughs quietly. It is the first sound of joy you've heard in hours. He reaches out to steady his friend, and for a brief moment, the air feels almost light again. Even in the coldest corners of the world, companionship finds a way to survive. Experts still discuss how much cooperation existed among pirate crews compared to naval fleets. Some suggest that the lack of hierarchy forced men to rely on each other more deeply, while others claim constant tension made true friendship impossible. Watching them now, you can tell that both ideas hold some truth. The sea teaches cooperation, but it never forgets danger. You walk toward the bow where a young pirate sits cross-legged beside a small wooden box. He opens it carefully, revealing a handful of coals glowing faintly inside. The heat barely reaches his hands, yet he smiles as though it were a roaring fire. Two others kneel beside him, holding their palms close. Their breath fogs the air, their faces lit by the faint red glow. One of them hums an old tune. You remember reading that some crews passed small ember boxes like this between shifts. The coals would be covered in ash and carried from man to man, a fragile gift of warmth. If the fire died, it was said to bring bad luck, as if the ship itself had lost its heartbeat. You can feel that belief here in the reverence with which they handle the box. The wind stirs again, and the cold rushes back. A few men stop their feet, others pull scarves tighter around their faces. Yet, instead of retreating to their hammocks, they stayed together. One wraps an arm around another's shoulders, a third adjusts a blanket to cover both of them. These small acts repeat across the deck like quiet prayers. The cat appears, leaping from a barrel and weaving through their legs. It purrs pursily, brushing against their boots. Someone laughs and scoops it up, tucking it under his coat. The animal wriggles once, then settles, content. It is another kind of shared heat, a heartbeat against a heartbeat. A curious note from a 15th century chronicler described a practice called backsleeping. Two men would lie facing opposite directions, backs pressed together, sharing heat through the night. It was considered practical, not intimate. Yet, in these conditions, every small gesture carried meaning. You can almost see it now, rough faces, tired eyes, silent gratitude in the shared warmth. The ship rolls slightly, and one of the men laughs quietly. It is the first sound of joy you've heard in hours. He reaches out to steady his friend, and for a brief moment, the air feels almost light again. Even in the coldest corners of the world, companionship finds a way to survive. Experts still discuss how much cooperation existed among pirate crews compared to naval fleets. Some suggest that the lack of hierarchy forced men to rely on each other more deeply, while others claim
their words barely reaching beyond their hammocks. Every sound feels amplified here. The rattle of a chain, the sigh of the wind, a cough that echoes too long. Someone mutters about the sky, about how the stars look too bright tonight, how they shine like eyes watching from above. The others shush him quickly. No one likes that kind of talk when the sea listens so closely. Old maritime folklore describes how sailors filled the darkness with stories. It kept the fear from growing too large. Superstition was their armor, and the night was always full of omens. You can almost hear the stories now, whispered in voices rough from rum and cold. Ghost ships that sail without crew, mermaids that hum to lure men overboard, a shadow that walks the deck before death visits the next dawn. A curious note in a medieval sea journal tells of pirates who refused to whistle after sunset, believing it would summon storms. Another record mentions that no one dared to point at the moon while at sea for fear of drawing bad luck. You watch as one man looks up but quickly lowers his gaze, pretending he was never staring. The fear is not loud here, but it is deep, woven into habit. The cat lifts its head from the captain's chair, eyes glowing faintly in the dim light. A few of the men nod to it, as though acknowledging a silent guardian.
For all their roughness, they cling to signs of protection wherever they can find them. A bit of faith against a world that offers none. The ship creaks again, and someone whispers a prayer, not to God, but to the sea itself. "Be kind tonight," he says quietly. No one mocks him. Every man here understands the sentiment. Historians often write about the violence of pirates, but they rarely mention their fear of the supernatural. For men who lived without certainty, the boundary between life and myth was thin. Some believed the sea had moods, that it could love or hate them, depending on how they behaved. You can almost feel that belief pulsing through the planks beneath your feet. A faint light flickers outside the port window, distant but moving. The men notice it too. One sits up, squinting. "Ship," he says under his breath. Another shakes his head. "Too small." The light drifts closer, then vanishes completely. A ripple of unease runs through the room. Someone mutters that it was a lantern carried by spirits, a sign that another soul will be taken before morning. In an old chronicle of Baltic sailors, there is mention of the dead lantern, a flicker of light said to appear before a death at sea. Some swore it was the reflection of Street Elmo's fire, a natural glow born of electricity. Others said it was something older, a messenger from the deep. Scientists today speak of plasma, of physics and ionized air. But standing here, surrounded by anxious faces, the explanation feels less comforting than the legend. One man rises from his hammock and spits on the floor, a ritual meant to break bad luck. Another scratches a cross into the wood with a knife tip. The sound of the blade is sharp and final. They settle again, though none truly relax. Their breaths rise in small clouds, steady but too fast. You look up at the ceiling, where the lantern's flame trembles with every movement of the ship. Shadows ripple across the beams like waves. The pirates watch them too, as if half expecting one to move differently, to separate and take shape. A detail from an early navigator's logbook describes how men sometimes heard voices during the stillest nights, whispers woven into the sound of the wind. Some believed they were lost sailors calling for help. Others said it was the sea repeating every word ever spoken aboard her. You pause now, listening. The wind slides through the cracks, and for a moment you think you hear something softer beneath it, like the murmur of words in another language. The youngest pirate sits up, clutching a piece of cloth around his shoulders. "Do you hear it?" he whispers. No one answers. The others keep their eyes closed, pretending they are already asleep. Pretending is often the only defense left. You glance toward the cat again. It is sitting upright now, staring at the same spot where the light appeared earlier. Its tail flecks once. A shiver passes through the room. The man nearest the door stands abruptly and throws a handful of salt onto the floor. "For peace," he says. The others nod, grateful for the excuse to move, to do something. Modern scholars continue to debate how much sailors actually believed in these omens, and how much they used them to make sense of fear. It is easy to dismiss such tales from the comfort of land, but here, where darkness feels alive, reason bends quickly. The lantern dims, its flame shrinking low. The men lie still again. Outside, the wind hums a single note that seems to circle the ship. You close your eyes and let the sound wash through you. The fear is not sharp now, only steady, familiar, almost gentle. It wraps around you like the sea's own lullaby. In the quiet that follows, the ship drifts onward through the black water. The stories fade into silence, but their shapes remain, curled like smoke above the hammocks. Every sailor here carries a superstition close to his heart, a charm against the unknown. And tonight, as the sea whispers around you, you understand why some darkness can only be endured by giving it a name. The night sky clears, and with it comes a sight so strange that the men forget their fear for a moment. You step onto the deck and look upward. The darkness has softened into a deep indigo, and across it stretch ribbons of light, green and gold, shifting like silt in invisible wind. The northern lights shimmer above the frozen sea. The pirates stand scattered across the deck, their faces tilted toward the sky. No one speaks at first. Even the wind has gone quiet, as if the world itself is listening. The lights ripple and twist, reflecting off the ice floating beside the ship. For a moment, the entire vessel seems to glow. Travelers of the northern oceans recorded these lights for centuries, describing them as spirits, omens, or fire in the heavens. Mariners who had no knowledge of magnetism or solar winds gave them names instead: ghost fires, angels dancing, sky serpents. To those who lived by the sea, they were both beautiful and terrifying. You can feel why. The lights move with a kind of purpose, too graceful to seem natural. A pirate near you crosses himself, whispering a prayer. Another laughs softly, pretending not to care, but his voice trembles. In the glow, his eyes gleam like wet stones. One curious account, written by a Hanseatic merchant in the 1400s, describes sailors falling to their knees when they first saw the aurora. He wrote that the heavens opened and burned like oil upon water. It must have felt like a message from the divine, or perhaps a warning. Here, under this same cold sky, you can understand both reactions. The lights continue to shift, stretching across the horizon like rivers of living flame. The ice on the rigging glows faintly, and the sails, stiff with frost, shine in pale colors. The ship itself seems otherworldly, suspended between two worlds, one of earth and water, and the other of sky and wonder. The pirates whisper now, voices hushed, as if afraid to disturb the magic. Maybe it's the souls of the dead, one says, another replies, or the treasure of heaven spilling out. A third simply watches, his breath shallow, eyes wide. Historians who study maritime folklore have written much about how sailors sought meaning in what they could not explain. For men who lived at the mercy of the elements, the sky was both guide.
Linger on deck, unable to look away from the horizon, where the last traces of light flicker and vanish. The air feels sharper now, cleaner somehow, as if the world has been washed. The stars return, faint but steady. The ship careens softly beneath your feet, a sound that feels familiar again after so much wonder. Below, the men will tell stories about this night for years. Some will say the lights were spirits guiding them through the ice. Others will claim they saw shapes in the glow, faces, wings, cities of fire. Each version will carry a piece of truth, because what they felt was real, even if the cause remains mystery. You close your eyes and breathe in the frozen air. The memory of that color lingers behind your eyelids, bright and alive. The sea sighs softly against the hull. Above, the last spark of green fades into the stars, and the world returns to darkness. But for a little while, the pirates of this frozen ship have seen heaven touch the earth, and the sea, for once, feels almost kind. The sky is dark again, and the wonder of the lights has faded into the memory of cold work. The pirates have grown quieter. Their laughter, small as it was, has thinned away into mutters and sigh. You stand near the main mast, listening to the slow rhythm of the ship. Every groan of wood, every drip of water from the rigging, seems to count time, steady and endless. Sleep has become more precious than gold now. Men take it in fragments wherever they can find it. You watch one sailor slumped against the barrel, eyes half closed, his breath shallow. Another sits beside him, head nodding, hands still gripping a rope, as if afraid to let go even in dreams. Their faces are pale with fatigue, the kind that seeps into the bones and makes thought itself heavy. Records from surviving logbooks often describe this kind of exhaustion. It was not simple tiredness, but a deep fog that dulled the senses. Men forgot names, stumbled over simple knots, or laughed at things that were not funny. Some whispered to shadows, or argued with the wind. The line between waking and sleeping blurred until both felt the same. You move toward the hatch, looking below deck. The hammocks sway slowly, filled with bodies that hardly move. The air is heavy, still thick with the smell of tar and sweat. It feels almost sacred, as if every breath here is borrowed. Some men dream, some do not, and a few simply stare into nothing, their eyes open but unfocused. A curious report from a Danish merchant voyage speaks of the sleepless sickness, a condition brought on by cold, hunger, and fear. Sailors afflicted by it drifted in a half-conscious state, unable to rest, yet unable to stay awake. Some claimed to see figures walking through the ship at night, quiet and watchful, though no one else ever saw them. You can imagine how such illusions might take root here, in the hum of endless night. One man near the door mumbles numbers under his breath, counting the creaks of the mast. He repeats the rhythm softly, as if the pattern itself keeps him sane. His hands twitch with each sound, his lips barely moving. A neighbor in the next hammock tells him to stop, but he does not hear. The counting becomes part of the ship's music. The historian who wrote about this voyage noted that sleeplessness was one of the cruelest punishments of sea life. When warmth and food could not be found, sleep was the only true escape, and even that was stolen by the motion of the waves or the moan of the wind. Here you feel the truth of that. Each man seems caught between two worlds, neither resting nor living fully. The lanterns burn lower, the light fading into a soft orange glow. The shadows stretch across the beams, long and thin. A few men toss in their hammocks, their faces twitching as dreams flicker behind their eyes. You wonder what they see. Perhaps the shore. Perhaps the faces of those they left behind. Or maybe nothing. Just the color of the sea pressed against the lids. A note from a 15th century surgeon's journal tells of sailors who dreamed only in shades of gray after months at sea. The endless water dulled their imagination. The same rhythm, the same sound, even in sleep. You feel that monotony here now, the slow erosion of color from the mind. One man wakes suddenly, gasping. He sits up and grabs his chest. His breathing is ragged, eyes wide. The others stir, but do not move to help. He mutters something about falling, about the sea pulling him under. Then he lies back down, trembling.
Within moments, he is asleep again, or something close to it. The others watch him for a while, then close their eyes once more. Modern researchers have tried to explain these night terrors as a mix of exhaustion, malnutrition, and stress. The body becomes confused, dreaming before it has even fallen asleep. Yet out here, explanations do not ease the fear. When every creak might be the ocean calling your name, logic does not help much. You climb back to the deck, seeking air. The night wind stings your face. Frost glitters faintly along the railing. A few pirates stand guard, their eyes half shut, but still alert. They sway with the motion of the ship, their balance perfect, even in near sleep. You can tell they are fighting to stay awake. Their heads drop, then lift again. One hums softly to keep himself conscious. It is said that during the longest voyages, men could fall asleep standing up, bodies trained by necessity. Some captains punished them for it. Others looked the other way, knowing that exhaustion could not be commanded. You look at these men now and wonder how they'll make it through another week of this frozen limbo. The sea sighs beneath the hull, a steady rhythm that could be comforting or maddening, depending on the hour. The moon is low, casting a pale light over the deck. It feels more like night and more like a dream that has gone on too long. You close your eyes and hear the creaking again, the breathing, the faint hum of the watchman's tune. It is easy to see how the mind starts to unravel here. The ocean has no silence, only repetition. Even rest becomes work. Yet in that strange space between waking and sleep, something keeps the men alive. Maybe it is habit, maybe hope, or maybe the ship itself, carrying them forward through a darkness that never truly ends. The wind returns before sunrise, howling across the deck like an angry voice. You wake to the sound of canvas snapping overhead, the ship tilting sharply as waves slam against the hull. The calm that held for days is gone. The sea is alive again, dark and violent. You grab the nearest rope to steady yourself, your breath turning white in the air. The pirates are already awake. Shouts echo through the storm as men rush to their stations. The cold rain stings like shards of glass against your skin. Salt water sprays over the bow, freezing almost instantly when it hits the wood. The air smells of iron and fear. Historical accounts describe winter storms as the true test of seamanship. In fair weather, a ship obeys her crew. In a gale, she remembers her own will. You can see it now. The deck pitched steeply to one side, barrels breaking free, ropes snapping like whips. The men fight to regain control, their boots slipping on the slick planks. One pirate clings to the rigging, shouting orders, his voice nearly swallowed by the wind. Another tries to haul a frozen line, his fingers raw and bleeding. The sails strain so hard that you expect them to tear. Each gust feels like a living thing pushing back against every effort. A curious note from a 16th century logbook mentions sailors describing storms as the sea's tantrums. They swore that the water itself could sense fear. The more the crew panicked, the harder the wind blew. The pirates here seemed to believe it too. They grit their teeth, muttering curses and prayers together, trying to sound braver than they feel. Lightning flashes far away, lighting the clouds in pale silver. For a brief second, you see the horizon vanish. The sea and sky merge into one raging wall. The next moment, everything is dark again. The thunder follows, distant but growing closer. The captain appears from his cabin, coat whipping in the wind, pistol still tucked into his belt. His eyes scan the chaos. "Hold fast," he roars. The men obey. Even fear cannot drown discipline when survival depends on it. He grips the wheel himself, his hands white on the wood. The ship shudders under his command.
Waves glow faintly where lightning reflects off their edges. The sight is beautiful and horrifying at once. The ocean looks endless, alive, and hungry. You feel a strange calm settle over you, a surrender that comes from realizing how small you truly are. The storm rages on. The captain grips the wheel, his voice hoarse from shouting. The men haul lines, bail water, patch tears. Hours blur together. The world has shrunk to the ship and the wind and the endless rhythm of survival. Each second feels stretched, heavy with meaning. Then, without warning, the thunder stops. The wind weakens. The sea exhales, still restless, but no longer furious. The ship drifts slowly, battered but upright. The men slump where they stand, too tired to cheer. One sits against the mast, head bowed, his hands shaking. Another wipes his face and mutters a thank you to whatever power he still believes in. A single ray of pale light breaks through the clouds. It touches the deck, the ropes, the bruised faces of the crew. The pirates look up, their expressions blank, too weary for relief. The storm has passed, but it has taken something with it. You can feel the emptiness it leaves behind, like the silence after shouting. You breathe deeply, the air sharp in your lungs. The cold feels different now, less cruel, more real. Around you, the men begin to move again, checking damage, tying knots, scraping ice from the rails. They do not speak of fear or luck. They simply return to their rhythm. The sea has tested them, and for tonight, they are still here. Morning arrives without color. The world is a blur of gray, and the air feels as still as glass. The storm has ended, but what it left behind is worse in its own quiet way. The cold has deepened, sharp enough to sting the lungs with every breath. You step onto the deck, your boots crunching on a crust of frozen salt. The sea around the ship has slowed, thickened, and now floats with patches of ice drifting close together like cracked mirrors. The sails hang limp and heavy, glazed with frost. Each rope glitters faintly, stiff and unmoving. The pirates move carefully, their steps cautious. No one speaks much. The ship seems suspended between motion and stillness, alive but trapped in a world turned white. A record from a 15th century expedition describes mornings like this as waking inside a frozen breath. The sea stopped feeling like water. The sound of waves softened until it became a muffled hum, as if the ocean had gone to sleep. You feel that now. The air is thick with silence. Even the wind seems afraid to stir. One of the men leans over the rail and stares into the icy water. Sheets of thin ice bump against the hull with a hollow ringing sound. He reaches out with a pole and pushes them away, but more drift in from the horizon. Another man joins him, muttering about how the sea looks like a graveyard. No one laughs. The frost has claimed everything. The deck glows faintly under the weak light, each board glistening like marble. When you touch the rail, it burns your skin with cold. The pirates pull scarves higher over their faces, their beards crusted white. Even their breath freezes briefly before fading into the air. A small but telling detail from one explorer's account notes that when the cold reached this point, ships began to grow quiet, not only because of weather, but because sound itself dulled. The cold thickened the air, swallowing noise. The usual creaks and groans of the vessel softened into whispers. You listen carefully now. The ship still moves, but its voice has changed, gentler, subdued. Below deck the air is warmer but foul. The pirates huddle in layers of wool and canvas, some sleeping, some just staring into space. The lanterns barely hold their flame, their light dim and steady. The heat from the coals does little against the creeping frost along the walls. When one man exhales, you can see his breath drift upward like a ghost. Historians often write of this part of a voyage as the hardest, the stillness after the storm. The adrenaline fades, leaving only exhaustion and cold. There are no fires to tend, no winds to fight, only waiting. And waiting at sea is the cruelest labor of all. You climb back to the deck, where a few men chip at the ice gathering along the rail. Their movements are slow and rhythmic. One taps with a hammer, another scrapes with a blade. The sound carries faintly, echoing through the still air. It feels like working inside a frozen cathedral. A curious tradition from Scandinavian sailors claimed that whistling could wake the wind. Crews stuck in frozen calm would whistle softly together, believing that the sound called the sea back to life. One of the pirates begins to do it now, a thin, shaky tune. Another joins in, then another, until a faint chorus drifts across the deck. The sound feels fragile, but defiant. The sky brightens slightly, and the faintest hint of sun appears, a pale circle without warmth. The light reflects off the ice, flooding the ship in a soft white glow. It is beautiful, almost holy, and yet there is danger in it. The pirates shield their eyes as the brightness bounces from the frozen sea. For a moment, the world feels too bright to be real. A sailor drops his hammer suddenly. The noise echoes like a gunshot. Everyone turns to look. The man stares at his hands, red and stiff. Frostbite has taken hold, spreading pale patches across his fingers. Another man helps him wrap them in cloth, rubbing gently. No one speaks. Pain has become a private matter here. Experts still debate how crews in medieval winters managed injuries like these without proper medicine. Some records describe heated stones pressed against the skin. Others mentioned wrapping hands in animal fat to keep blood flowing. The pirates here likely know a few of these tricks. Survival leaves little room for hesitation. The ship creaks again as a sheet of ice slides against its side. Its sound is deep and slow, like the groan of something ancient. You look out over the horizon, where the sea has turned white. The ice spreads endlessly, glinting in the light. It feels as if the world itself has stopped breathing. One of the pirates murmurs that they have entered a place where time does not move. Another spits and says it is just the sea sleeping. Their words hang in the air, frost-laden and fragile. You find yourself hoping the second man is right. A detail from a medieval poem about northern sailors reads, "The sea lay still as thought, and our hearts froze with it." Standing here now, you understand what that means. The stillness is more frightening than the storm. There is no motion, no sound, only the vast white emptiness that swallows all sense of direction. You close your eyes for a moment, listening. The ice crackles faintly, the ship sighs, and the men's breathing blend into the sound. The sea, though frozen, still lives beneath it all, patient and waiting. And you realize that even in silence, it is never truly still. The ice only hides the movement until it chooses to wake again. The ice thickens as the day drags on. The ship pushes forward inch by inch, its hull grinding against the frozen surface. The sound is deep and aching, like teeth on stone. You feel each vibration under your feet, a steady reminder that the ocean is no longer water, but something harder, heavier, and crueler. The pirates move slowly now, their steps cautious. Every rope, every tool, every finger feels stiff. Even speech seems to take effort. The air is so cold that words turn to mist before they are finished. You can see breath hanging between them like pale smoke. Near the bow, two men pry open a storage chest, their movements sluggish. Inside are pieces of loot wrapped in cloth, silver cups, coins, a gold chain tangled with bits of rope. They stare at the treasure for a moment.
Pausing near the fire, it curls beside the iron bowl, tail twitching slowly. The men watch it, some smiling faintly. Its fur catches the light, gleaming like warm ash. In this frozen world, even that small movement feels alive, a sign that something still resists the cold. The sun begins to sink again, a pale disk swallowed by clouds. The light fades quickly, leaving behind a strange glow that reflects from the ice. The ship looks ghostly now, floating in a world of silver and gray. The air grows quieter, the sound of grinding ice slowing to an occasional groan. One pirate holds out his hand, catching flakes of snow. "Looks like ash," he says softly. Another nods. "Maybe it is." The words drift away before anyone can answer. You look down at your boots, half buried in frost, and realize how small your movements have become. Every breath feels slower, every thought weighed down by the cold. Yet somewhere deep below, the sea is still moving. You can feel it in the faint sway of the deck, a pulse that refuses to die. The fire flickers again, its glow shrinking. One man feeds it the last scrap of wood. The flame catches for a moment, then steadies. The pirates lean closer, their faces ghostly in the dim light. Around them lies all the wealth they ever wanted, frozen and useless. What keeps them alive now is not gold, but each other's breath, the rhythm of hearts still beating in defiance of the cold. The night that follows feels endless. The wind has stilled again, but the silence carries a weight that makes even breathing sound too loud. You move across the deck carefully, your boots crunching softly on the thin crust of frost. The world is so still that each sound seems to echo across miles. The pirates barely move now. Most lie in their hammocks or huddle near the galley, conserving strength. Every movement costs effort. Every thought drags like an anchor. When morning finally comes, it arrives without color. The sky and sea merge into the same dull gray, making it impossible to tell where one ends and the other begins. The ice that surrounded the ship has loosened slightly, broken by the faint push of the current. The ship cocks, sighing as if waking from a deep sleep. One by one the pirates stir. They look like shadows of their former selves, faces gaunt, lips cracked, eyes dull with exhaustion. Yet there is a quiet endurance in them too, the strange stubbornness that belongs to people who have survived everything except comfort. A fragment from a 15th century sailor's diary speaks of this moment after the worst of winter, when the sun finally returns, but the soul feels too tired to notice. "We were alive," he wrote, "but half of us were ghosts already." You can see that truth reflected here in the gray light washing over the deck. A few men rise to their feet, stamping slowly to wake their blood. One man pours a trickle of rum into a tin cup, hands shaking as he passes it around. They drink in silence, The warmth spreads briefly through their bodies, a tiny rebellion against the cold. The ship rocks gently now, as if testing its own strength. The ice groans beneath it, splitting in slow cracks that echo like distant thunder. The men pause to listen. The sound of ice breaking means freedom. It also means danger, for sharp edges can tear through the hull as easily as blades. They hold still, waiting to see which it will be. The captain appears on deck, shoulders hunched, face gray under the frost. He glances at the horizon, where faint light glows through the mist. "It's moving," he says quietly. His voice is hoarse, but steady. A few men look up, hope flickering weakly in their eyes. A curious passage from an early explorer's account describes the first sunrise after weeks of darkness. The writer called it a wound of light in a frozen world. You feel the same sensation now as the sky brightens, the pale sun lifting above the edge of the sea. Its warmth is weak, but its presence alone seems to wake the ship. The pirates straighten slowly, turning their faces toward the light. They stand close together, sharing the little heat it offers. Some smile faintly, others close their eyes as if afraid it might disappear. The glow paints their cheeks in pale gold, bringing life back into the scene for the first time in weeks. A small sound interrupts the stillness, the crackle of rope snapping somewhere above. Everyone looks up. A line of ice has formed across the main sail, and as it thaws unevenly, the tension pulls too tight. The captain shouts a quick order, and two men climb the rigging to fix it. Their movements are clumsy, but their determination is fierce. You can feel the ship awaken again, creaking, shifting, alive. One pirate begins to sing softly under his breath. The tune is simple and slow, a song about ports and warmth and women left behind. Others join in quietly, their voices rough but steady. The sound fills the air, fragile but real. It spreads across the ship like a returning heartbeat. Historians often debate what kept crews like these from giving up during winters that stripped them of everything. Some say superstition, others discipline or luck. But looking at these men now, it feels simpler than that. What keeps them alive is the rhythm they share, the belief that another sunrise always comes. The sun climbs higher, and for the first time in days, it feels almost warm on your face. You watch as the ice continues to drift apart, breaking in slow, graceful movements. The sound is deep and echoing, a kind of music in itself. One man laughs softly. Another whispers, "She's letting us go." The captain stands by the wheel, watching the horizon. His coat flutters faintly in the breeze. He does not smile, but there is a softness in his eyes now, a quiet gratitude. He looks at his men, then at the sea, and nods once, as if acknowledging a truce. A curious passage told in the ports of Bergen speaks of ships that survived impossible winters because the ocean pitied them. Sailors swore the sea could grow tired of cruelty, releasing those who had learned humility. Whether true or not, you can almost believe it here. The ice parts slowly, and the ship drifts forward into open water. The men cheer, weak but sincere. Their voices echo over the frozen expanse, carried by the faint wind. The cat darts across the deck, tail high, chasing a patch of sunlight. For the first time in weeks, you hear laughter without bitterness. You grip the railing, feeling the ship tremble as it moves again. The sound of creaking wood returns, louder now, fuller. The sea is still cold and merciless, but it is moving, and movement is life. The pirates gather near the bow, watching the horizon brighten. They look like survivors of a dream too long held. their faces lined with fatigue, but touched by hope. In the glow of morning, they are no longer just men of violence and greed. They are simply human beings who have endured the impossible. The ship pushes forward through the last fragments of ice, and behind it, the frozen sea closes quietly, leaving no trace of the struggle. Ahead, the open water waits, dark but alive, and for the first time in a long while, the air carries the faint scent of salt instead of death.
The soul. When warmth returned, so did laughter, and the simplest things became miracles: a warm breeze, a soft wave, a bird in the distance. You can see that awakening here as well. The cat stretches on the deck, its fur catching the Sunday. It yawns, curls its tail, and begins to chase a bit of rope moving in the wind. The men stop to watch for a moment. One shakes his head and mutters that the beast is braver than all of them. The others chuckle quietly. The sound carries across the water, gentle and human. A curious entry in a sailor's log from the Baltic tells how, after long winters, crews often forgot the sound of their own laughter. The first time they heard it again, they would stop and listen, as if afraid it might break. You feel the same stillness here now as the laughter fades, fragile but precious. The sun climbs higher, pale and hesitant. The light spreads across the deck, warming the wood until the frost begins to melt in thin rivulets. Drops of water fall from the ropes and rigging, each one catching the light like a small gem. The ship smells different now: wet wood, thawyer tar, and faint smoke from the galley. Life returning in scent and sound. Historians still question how pirate crews handled the first days after surviving such hardship. Some believe they celebrated wildly at the next port, drowning fear in drink and noise. Others think they grew quiet, unwilling to break the spell of survival. Watching these men, it feels closer to the latter. Their joy is not loud. It hums softly beneath their movements, a rhythm that matches the calm sea. The captain stands near the helm, watching the horizon. His face remains hard, but his eyes follow the water with care. He says nothing for a long while, then finally murmurs, "South. Keep her south." The men obey without question. Their trust is silent now, born not of command, but of shared endurance. The sails fill with a light wind, the ship groans, but moves forward with ease. The sound of the water lapping against the hull is steady, almost soothing. You lean against the railing, feeling the vibration through the wood. It feels like a heartbeat slowly finding its rhythm again. A small gull appears in the distance, circling once before gliding away. The men notice it immediately. One points and says, "Land soon." The others nod, hope flickering like flame. Whether the bird truly means land or not does not matter. Belief itself is warmth now. Below deck, the air smells faintly of smoke and salt. The hammocks hang empty for once. The men prefer to stay above to see the sky and feel the Sunday. One stirs a pot of thin soup in the galley, humming a tune so low it blends with the sound of the sea. Another mends a torn sleeve, the needle trembling in his hand, but steady enough to finish the job. A curious fact from naval records shows that during recovery from cold voyages, sailors often became restless when warmth returned. They could not sleep easily, as if their bodies no longer trusted comfort. The pirates seemed the same now, their eyes darting often to the horizon, waiting for something unseen. The afternoon light softens to gold, the water ahead glimmers faintly, and the ice is gone entirely now. The ship moves freely, and with each gentle tilt, the memory of stillness fades. One man begins to whistle an old tavern song. It wavers at first, then strengthens as others join in. The sound spreads through the air like sunlight through clouds. The captain listens, but does not stop them.
He leans on the railing, hands clasped behind his back. The tune drifts upward, mingling with the cries of the gulls. You watch the men sing and realize they are no longer thinking of the cold or the storm or even the deaths that haunt them. They are thinking of home, whatever shape that takes in their minds. The sun sinks slowly toward the horizon. The sky blushes with faint pink and orange colors that had not been seen in weeks. The sea reflects it perfectly, calm and endless. The ship glides forward into the light, its sails glowing faintly. The men fall quiet, not wanting to disturb the moment. You breathe deeply, the air soft against your throat. The cold still lingers, but it no longer feels cruel. It feels like memory, sharp, distant, but fading. The pirates stand together, eyes fixed on the sunset. In their silence lies gratitude, and perhaps the smallest seed of peace. The sun sinks slowly, and the sky melts into a deep, calm blue. The horizon glows faintly as the first stars appear. The pirates stand quiet, their shadows stretching long across the deck. The cold has softened to a gentle chill, the kind that brushes rather than bites. The ship glides on steady waters, her hull whispering softly with each wave. You lean against the railing, feeling the vibration through the wood. It feels like a heartbeat, slowly finding its rhythm again. A small gull appears in the distance, circling once before gliding away. The men notice it immediately. One points and says, "Land soon." The others nod, hope flickering like flame. Whether the bird truly means land or not does not matter. Belief itself is warmth now. Below deck, the air smells faintly of smoke and salt. The hammocks hang empty for once. The men prefer to stay above to see the sky and feel the Sunday. One stirs a pot of thin soup in the galley, humming a tune so low it blends with the sound of the sea. Another mends a torn sleeve, the needle trembling in his hand, but steady enough to finish the job. A curious fact from naval records shows that during recovery from cold voyages, sailors often became restless when warmth returned. They could not sleep easily, as if their bodies no longer trusted comfort. The pirates seemed the same now, their eyes darting often to the horizon, waiting for something unseen. The afternoon light softens to gold, the water ahead glimmers faintly, and the ice is gone entirely now. The ship moves freely, and with each gentle tilt, the memory of stillness fades. One man begins to whistle an old tavern song. It wavers at first, then strengthens as others join in. The sound spreads through the air like sunlight through clouds. The captain listens, but does not stop them. He leans on the railing, hands clasped behind his back. The tune drifts upward, mingling with the cries of the gulls. You watch the men sing and realize they are no longer thinking of the cold or the storm or even the deaths that haunt them. They are thinking of home, whatever shape that takes in their minds. The sun sinks slowly toward the horizon. The sky blushes with faint pink and orange colors that had not been seen in weeks. The sea reflects it perfectly, calm and endless. The ship glides forward into the light, its sails glowing faintly. The men fall quiet, not wanting to disturb the moment. You breathe deeply, the air soft against your throat. The cold still lingers, but it no longer feels cruel. It feels like memory, sharp, distant, but fading. The pirates stand together, eyes fixed on the sunset. In their silence lies gratitude, and perhaps the smallest seed of peace. The sun sinks slowly, and the sky melts into a deep, calm blue. The horizon glows faintly as the first stars appear. The pirates stand quiet, their shadows stretching long across the deck. The cold has softened to a gentle chill, the kind that brushes rather than bites. The ship glides on steady waters, her hull whispering softly with each wave. You move along the deck, taking in the scene. The men are still, not from fatigue, but from reflection. Some lean against the railing, watching the sea. Others sit cross-legged near the mast, heads tilted back to study the stars. Their eyes seem clearer now, the wildness of hunger and cold replaced by something gentler. Historical accounts often describe how sailors changed after surviving winter seas. They grew quiet, superstitious still, but also tender in strange ways. Men who once cursed freely began to hum old songs, carve bits of wood, or keep journals they could barely write. Perhaps survival teaches reverence. The cat sits on a coil of rope, its fur gleaming in the moonlight. It cleans its paws slowly, indifferent to the world. The men take comfort in its calm. One scratches its back with the tip of a finger, smiling faintly. The small sound of purring fills the still air like a reminder that life continues, no matter how much the sea has taken. Below deck, the lanterns burn brighter tonight. The men have lit more than usual, as if defying the darkness. The light flickers on the walls, turning the wood to gold. You walk through the narrow passage, past hammocks swinging gently. The smell of smoke and salt still lingers, but it feels different now. It smells like warmth instead